from a business standpoint, you should never just jump in both feet. And really, it is a try, optimize. And if there's anything I've learned is that you can jump into something and you'll pay 2 times what you get and you think you're getting decent return. But if you really optimize and ramp into it, you can get twice the return just by doing it right.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. A deep understanding of your ideal customer profile is the foundation of your sales, marketing, and e-commerce success. Unfortunately, most companies struggle to create their marketing positioning around their ICP, as they are often serving multiple industries and buyers. This issue is even more critical for your digital and e-commerce journey, as the success of your market would be dependent upon how well you map your buyer journeys aligned to your ICPs. In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn, who brings significant expertise to discuss ICP identification strategies. We covered many grounds in this episode, including the ideal customer profile and how it differs from buyer personas. We also discussed how ICP strategies would differ for both B2B and B2C businesses, and how they would differ for both PPC and SEO. Finally, we discussed the strategies for identifying and prioritizing ICPs when companies might be serving multiple industries or multiple personas inside a company. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And today's topic is going to be ICP. There are a lot of different interpretations related to ICP, but here for this session, we are going to talk about ideal customer profile. So we are going to start with the intros. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Eric Landman with Earthling Interactive. I'm a project manager and e-commerce developer. I'm a Magento certified solution specialist. I've built about 50 plus e-commerce sites and quite a variety of platforms, including Magento and Shopify and OS Commerce and a bunch of other stuff. My customers are about half business to consumer and about half B2B, business to business.
Thank you so much for being here, Eric. And I think your background is going to be super important, because in both cases, whether you talk about B2C or B2B, identifying the ideal customer profile is going to be super critical for the e-commerce as well as for the business model. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, Steve, can I move to you next? Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'd love to. My name is Steve Rice. I'm the founder of .com Jungle and also the co-founder of the Globally Conscious Leader. And at .com Jungle, we also develop websites and integrations. We mostly focus on helping customers make and implement wise technology choices. And sometimes it does take the form of a website or, like I said, an integration. And the Globally Conscious Leader is a new project for me, where we literally want to bring globally responsible leadership ideas to individual C-suite executives and aspiring leaders. And we're bringing together actually some really interesting people from the specialty outdoor retail space as mentors in this. So I'm sort of leveraging relationships I've had in the outdoor retail industry, which will probably be connected to some of the things we talk about today as well. So thank you.
And as we dive into that topic, Steve, I think we can talk about the ideal customer profile for globally conscious leaders. That will be a good exercise to find out, how to identify the ideal customer profile. So thank you so much for being here, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, Damon, can I move to you next? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Sam. Yeah, thanks. Damon Pistolka, Exit Your Way. What we do is we help owners create businesses that they can sell or succeed. So basically, if you have a business and you really don't know what you're going to do with it for the long term, we help plan that out and help them reach their goals.
And when you're working with those businesses, Damon, I can almost guarantee that when they don't know what they are going to do with their businesses, they probably don't know their ideal customer either.
So that is correct.
It's going to be really interesting to dig into those stories. Thank you so much for being here, Damon. Chris, can I move to you next, if you don't mind?
Yes, thank you, Sam. Chris Harrington, President and COO of Gen Alpha Technologies. We are a provider of e-commerce solutions for equipment and parts manufacturers. So happy to be here. Looking forward to this discussion.
I think ICP is super relevant for your space, Chris, in the B2B. If you don't know your ideal customer profile, I don't think the marketing is going to be effective. So thank you so much for being here, Chris.
Absolutely.
All right. So Dave, I think you are going to bring so many insights from the SEO and marketing automation perspective. That's why I wanted to keep you for last. So, okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sam.
Go ahead.
And thanks everybody for having me. BusyWeb is my agency. Been doing this for 22 years now, and we focus on the manufacturing and B2B services world, where we help generate traffic, ideally transfer that traffic into real results, and automate the interconnections to actually close deals and leads, which of course leads right back to your ICP, or ideal customer profile, aka your buyer persona or your sales persona. We're going to talk a lot about this stuff. It's going to be super fun. Thanks.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Damon. So we are going to dig right into the topic. So we want to set the stage. Let's say if the listeners are not really familiar with what an ideal customer is, what an ideal customer profile is, and why that is going to be important. Damon, would you help me setting the stage in defining what an ideal customer is for a business? And if you have a story that you might be able to share, good versus bad ideal customer profile.
I don't know if I've got the good versus bad, but your ideal customer profile is really who is the customer that if you could attract that one special person to buy from you, that is them. And it is amazing how easy it is to be wrong about that. And I think a lot of businesses miss it, and I have in our business even for a while. And when you go back and you look at your best customers and you really understand them well and talk to them, little simple thing like that, they can tell you a lot about themselves and why they do business with you and what they like or don't like about what you do. And that's really how you define it. But it is who you want to sell to.
Okay, amazing. So I think you are absolutely right that, I would probably think that, especially in the manufacturing community, 60 to 70% manufacturers probably would struggle with this question. Once they probably get on to their e-commerce journey, then they are going to probably be answering a lot of hard questions, and then they would probably know who their ideal customer profile is, because for marketing, especially if you are doing paid marketing, it's going to be super critical. So Dave, I'm actually going to move to you next, if you don't mind. So do you agree with the definition that Damon has provided? Would you add anything to that in terms of identifying the ideal customer profile?
I think with ICPs, customer profiling, it's really important not only to identify who your favorites are, but also who your most profitable customers are, and the space where you want to grow. And so the big points that we drive through for our customers, because that's actually the first thing that we do with all of our customers, we sit them down, we have a deep navel gazing session, and we look at what's really important as far as who your best customers are and what makes them tick. That not only comes from looking at who your favorites are, but looking at the data. And so what are your best traffic sources for your website, for your marketing, for your new deals, but also who are those most profitable ones. So you need to look at the entire universe of your buyer's journey and say, okay, for this many people or for this kind of person, they're more likely to make it all the way through. Or this kind of person is great up front, but they're only going to buy once and then they're never coming back. And so thinking about who that absolute best fit, and probably having a few different ideal customer profiles for different stages of life and for different stages of growth for your company is going to be very important. But the good news is that data is available for you to look at that. You just have to have your ERP, your CRM, your website, and your data analytics set up, and you need to know what to look at. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Okay, amazing. So I think you bring a very interesting point about the most favorite one, and I don't know how many companies really go for that. Maybe they do, but that's a very interesting point there. But I have one clarifying comment there. So when you said most profitable, did you mean the ones that are grossing the most revenue, or did you mean more from the ROI perspective, more from the profit perspective? Do you want to clarify that?
Probably most profit, but
Okay.
you really need to think about, because you can go with, I can make 10,000 unit sales of this particular thing, but I'm only going to make $1 off of each of those. Well, that's not probably all that great. If you can do the flip side and make 2,000 sales, but make $100 per, that's a much better play. So you want to make sure that you're looking at what's best for your business and also sets you up for long-term sustainability.
Yeah, love it. So, Eric, do you want to define the ICP next? Do you agree with the definition so far? Do you have anything to add? Any examples?
Well, I guess I'd say that it's maybe not just one client profile. We have some customers, one that sells industrial equipment, that participates in several different markets: health clubs, hotels, schools. So if you think about those three sorts of organizations, you have very different types of prospective customers. For a school, it's going to be a purchasing agent or a planner. For a health club, it's going to be an architect or a product specifier. So it becomes a pretty big challenge trying to construct a marketing message and landing pages and campaigns for one type of customer, because you don't have one type of customer. You've got 3 or 4 types of customers. And so if you really get into this, you've got to segment your marketing efforts and look at your reporting and determine what to do with each of those individual market segments. And of course, as Dave said, and I'm quite sure Christina would, or Chris would echo that, that's got to start with data. So you've got to know, who's buying what and how much, because usually your perception of this is wrong. You've got to look at the data and see, what they're buying and when they're buying it too. Some of this may be seasonal, and the time span of the purchases, because some of these organizations, as I mentioned, they might have a 6-month timeline on purchasing something. So just because they come to your site in January doesn't mean they're going to buy something in February. It's probably more like June. So you have to consider all of those sorts of parameters.
Yeah, so some very interesting comments there. And even though it's called ideal customer profile, I want to make sure that we are not only talking about the paying customer here, because it could be also the ideal prospect profile, and they both would probably fall in the same category. So when you are defining them, they both are, even though you are calling them as ideal customer profile, they are meant to cover both the prospect as well as the customer. Do you agree with me there or not, Eric?
Yeah, I do. In fact, we use a slightly different term when we're designing a site and building it out and working with the marketing team. We use the term personas. Okay. Which is more of a personalized representation of what this person thinks and how they behave and how they, what their thought process is and how they would get to the site. That's how we perceive of designing and building a site in terms of personas. It's just a nuance of the same concept.
Yeah, so there is going to be a little bit of discussion there with respect to ICP. I mean, if we talk about the pure play marketing terminology, ICP, my understanding is that they like to think this as more of the account as opposed to the person belonging to an account. So ICP is going to be the company. Your buyer persona is going to be the contact. That's my understanding. You guys probably can tell me if that is not right. So buyer persona, an account could have 50 different personas and they could have different needs. They could have different journeys overall from the customer journey perspective. They may have completely different landing pages. Okay, from the e-commerce perspective, they could have different pricing. I don't know if they are going to have different pricing. That I really don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. There could be a possibility if they have some sort of the corporate discount versus the branch discount. I don't know. But they are definitely they have very different needs overall, right? So next, I am actually going to move to Steve. Steve, what are your thoughts so far? Do you agree with the definition? Do you disagree with respect to ICP?
I'm gonna say I agree because I was about to sort of explain to you how I think about it and ask you if you thought that was correct. And I tend to think about it the way you mentioned, Sam.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to my customers, and I don't have a lot of customers that do a lot of account-based marketing where a true company ICP is important, even though they have ICPs, and I'll explain that in a second. But I do like to delineate that the ICP, from a semantic standpoint, we need to delineate the company from the people you're talking to.
Yep.
And so that's the semantics I use, is the ICP, the ideal customer profile. Is this company, what size are they, what industry are they in, who do they serve, and the avatars or personas around which you might craft the customer journey that Eric was talking about. Those are also the people, and this is what I find most interesting. This is the human part of it. These are the people that you teach your salespeople, anyone who contacts the customers, you teach them how to talk to those people. And I'll give you a quick example. Is one of my clients I've had for like 23 years is one of the coolest drug education textbook companies in the world. In fact, the guy who writes the textbook for this was the founder of Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics, or co-founder, years ago. So he's been around for 50 years. And this book is used at Harvard and Yale and whatnot. But they sell this book to students. They sell it to the bookstore buying agents, who also get their information from the professors, who sometimes say, you need to buy this book. Sometimes they say, you need to buy this book to the professor because the administrator said they need to. And then treatment professionals also buy the book, so they can turn around, even though they had it in school, they turn around and use it to help people who are dealing with gambling and heroin and meth and all the addictions that you could possibly have. So a good example, their ICPs are basically universities that support some sort of drug treatment education programs, and organizations, drug treatment organizations, whether they're public or private. And inside those, you have the university one's easy. You have administrators who actually might hire Daryl, Inaba is the gentleman, to come speak at a conference or actually co-teach a class with the professor. And so they have a different persona than the professor. And you speak way different to the professor, of course, than you would speak to the administrator. And the marketing is completely different too. The handouts are different. And imagine the students, you got to get in touch with them in a completely different way. And luckily for them, once the students take the classes, their persona becomes as a treatment professional. They already know who they are. They already have an opportunity to get back in touch with them. So I think that's a good example. And I ask you, is that the right way to go about it?
I think so. I think you are spot on, to be honest. And just to translate that story in slightly more manufacturing situation. So in the manufacturing world, let's say if you are trying to sell an equipment to a large company, and then you are going to be talking to, let's say, the technicians, the operations folks, the finance folks, the supply chain folks, they all are going to be using very different language. Okay. They all are going to have very different interests and drivers. So if you are going to be using the same language that you would use for your CFO to your, let's say, the sales guy, they're not going to be excited. They will make sure they'll shut you down, right? If you do that. So you definitely need to make sure that you have the tailored messaging for each of those personas. And those are going to be the buyer personas. But you are absolutely right. when you do the ideal customer profile, at that time you are looking at, okay, what is the amount of revenue, what are the number of employees, where they are located. Those are going to be the factors that are going to drive the overall marketing strategy for your ideal customer profile. I think Chris is going to have a lot of insights there, just because she has dealt with very large equipments and very large accounts, and she has actually sold herself. So she's going to have very interesting insights in terms of how they do account mapping in your world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to listen to what everybody has shared here. The thing that I think we're missing so far is to remember the companies in your ideal customer profile are the companies that you bring the greatest value to. So we have to remember to think about the customer as well. In our pursuit of being relentlessly focused on the customer, right? I mean, in order to do that, when we're profiling, we have to identify the pain points our products and services solve. And that becomes the market for our product, and it helps us identify the companies that can use our solution. So I think we really have to nail in on who gets the greatest value from what we can provide and what are their pain points, so we can deliver that marketing content and that other information and get all the value out of it that we intend to. So that would be most of the businesses, frankly, that I work with, they know who they're selling to. They talk a lot about customers, and customers who are manufacturers who talk a lot about their customers doesn't necessarily mean they have good focus on who their customers are and the problems that they're solving, right? So by doing these exercises, you can align your organization around the communication and the problems that you solve, so that when you're having discussions with clients, whoever they're meeting in your organization, there's a consistent level of understanding of what you do for them and how you can help them. So in addition to our goal for profits and revenues and everything else, we can't forget to, in our ideal customer profile, that we're really solving a problem for them in the end, and who has the greatest need for the problem that we solve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so some very interesting comments here. And Chris, I mean, you are going to have two favorite plugs, and one of which is going to be your data plug, and your second favorite is always like 80-20. And I think that's what you are talking about here. So in this particular case, you are absolutely right that you need to, I know that, I mean, let's say if you have, I don't know, maybe 10,000 SKUs, and out of those 10,000 SKUs, only you have 5 SKUs that are actually bringing the 80% of the revenue, and there are 10% customers that are actually bringing your 80% of the revenue. For you, probably ideal customer profile is going to be those customers that are really bringing the 80% of the revenue. Obviously, the others are important as well, but they are going to have a lot more noise. So, it is in your best effort to focus on those key customers, and then whatever time and money you have left in the pot, then figure out for those 20%.
You got it. And you know what's so beautiful about everything you just said is that e-commerce helps you with the other customers that are a little bit more administrative intensive, have needs. By having a self-service solution like e-commerce, a place for them to go to get answers to their own questions, alleviates your sales team from spending time with all the potential market of your business, but can help them focus on the ideal customer profile, but still have solutions for those outlying customers that maybe you still have are a great product fit, but the consumption of time to get them to a yes is a bit more challenging. E-commerce is a great fit for that space.
So that's going to be a very interesting comment, and I am going to take Dave's and Steve's advice, the people who are in the marketing spend space. Okay, so the reason why I think that you cannot simply rely on e-commerce for that 20%, because you have to plan your marketing spend. And if you're going after everybody, then it's going to be really hard to plan that marketing spend. So Damon, I'm actually going to come back to you. Overall, let's say if we look at the e-commerce, in case of e-commerce, the ideal customer profile is going to be super important, because let's say if I'm selling to 5 different industries, and if I'm doing, maybe 10, 15, 20 campaigns, and I'm trying to target everybody, I can almost guarantee that you are not going to get anywhere. And I think, you might remember this from our e-commerce conversation, that you did mention that, when you start on the e-commerce journey, just try to find that tiny bitty niche with respect to your product, with respect to your focus. Try to see if you are being successful there, and then replicate that success to other verticals. So in this particular case, let's say if you are e-commerce, would you suggest that, go after everybody and design your marketing campaigns, or would you focus on very narrow niche there, and then, figure out the ideal customer profile, and then maybe try out the other ideal customer profile that you might have in your bucket?
No. I'll just say it simply. It's a good way to waste money, because Google or Bing or whoever your spam is on, they'll take your money all day long. You can spend it the wrong way. But, there's people on here going to answer this better than I can. But, the approach that I've always seen that's been the most successful is you really have to understand your ideal customer profile, and then the messaging that's going to connect with them in any of these marketing campaigns. And it's not a one shot fits all by any means. You have to segment, like you said, the different ways and do it right. And I'll let Dave and Steve and the others talk about that. But, from a business standpoint, you should never just jump in both feet, and really it is a try, optimize. And if there's anything I've learned is that, you can jump into something and you'll pay 2 times what you get, and you think you're getting decent return. But if you really optimize and ramp into it, you can get twice the return just by doing it right, or doing it slowly and really learning along the way. That's my input, is take it slow and learn about it. Don't rush in.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with everything that you said, Damon, and I am actually going to ask Dave on his opinion. So let's say I'm actually going back to what Chris has said, right? So let's say if I have, $100,000 in my marketing budget, and out of that $100,000, I'm probably already spending 80,000, 90,000 on my 80% of the customers. These are large, big, giant customers, and obviously they are going to suck a lot of my marketing budget, because I need to produce case studies, I need to produce content, so much, right? And now then I have the small e-commerce customers left, right? So in case of e-commerce, how would you plan the conflicting priorities between your key customers versus your e-commerce customers? What approach would you take, Dave?
So I think the important approach to take as you're trying to split the difference between the 80 and the 20, and realizing that you don't ever want to leave money on the table whenever possible, right? Unless it's the wrong money, right? So if you're losing money per transaction on those 20%, you should probably just let them go. But if you're trying to round out and or look toward the future, perhaps a little bit, then it does make sense to put some marketing into that other 20% or the other 80% that you want to focus on in reaching the right people. You need to think about search engine optimization, and you need to build a critical mass in order to get to the right people in the first place. And so, yes, you do need to have that activity, but you do want to make sure that you're really measuring what you're getting and that you're always moving in the right direction, because it's super easy to get caught up in tactics and say, oh, well, look it, we just made a click, we just got a thing. And yeah, that's great, but was it really a thing? Was it really a helpful output? And this is one of the things where, especially a lot of manufacturers that have always just done great work and been rewarded with the business, but now the world is getting more complicated or more competitive, and so they're starting to actually have to fight for those dollars. Where they get hung up is they just shoot and figure, well, I know my customer. They've always been there. These are the people that I'm working with. Like, yeah, but what's that next market? Or what about the fact that huge multinational corporation just realized that your lunch looks mighty tasty and they want to come and eat it? And so you just need to build that and always be thinking about how you're reaching the critical mass on search engines and how you're reaching the critical mass on making sure that you've got a pipeline that you can continue to care and feed for, and growing those lists and that engagement by just doing some of the right things. So want to take 1 second. I know Eric raised his hand, so I want to give him the next bit. But shout out to Chuck Coxhead, friend of the show. With limited resources, it's crucial to understand that ICP defines those on whom you won't spend time. So this is a great point, and Chuck's always on point on those things. So shout out and thank you for that distinction.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Dave, because I'm curious about how this works. Suppose this example that you mentioned about a company who may be mature and has been around for quite a while. What do they do? What sort of tactics would they do to discover who their potential new target audience is, or ICP?
Mm-hmm.
How would they learn that? I'm not a marketing person, so I don't know these things.
Sure.
I'm just curious.
Great question, and thank you. The biggest things that I normally do with our clients is we will run some research on what's happening and what we know. So you can do simple things, and if we're doing straight e-commerce, it's kind of easy. You can do a Facebook lookalike campaign, right, and see what pops up. There's a lot of data analytics organizations that you can tap into that can give you a lot of detail on who's thinking about you and what you're looking at, even if you haven't looked at it. And then analytics will tell you quite a bit. And this is one of the kind of sneaky ways to use Google Ads. Just running campaigns and seeing what define or where the easy money is, right? So where the easy clicks are. If you have different themes that you run, and this one has 10 times the amount of interest as another theme or tactic or keyword, then you want to start balancing some of that in. And the ultimate goal of all advertising is to find high traffic, low competition, right? And so as we build that out, that's part of where you can find that and start to skate where the puck is going instead of always chasing after it on the ice.
Okay, amazing, guys. So I am going to have one more clarifying question for you, Dave, especially around these conflicting priorities. And in my experience, I think ICP does have a little bit of conflict there when you are competing in different industries, when you are competing for different customers, and you have the constant marketing budget here, right? And you have to decide, okay, which are the ones that you want to go after. So when I think of the SEO, in my mind, SEO is more of the permanent real estate. Once you establish, it's very hard to sort of change. In case of PPC, you can have the campaign, you get the results, you move on, right? It's very temporary. So now when you are thinking of designing the SEO versus PPC and thinking about your ideal customer profile, so now going back to the same story where you were, competing with your own marketing budget, where you had your key customers, 80% of the marketing budget. And then you have these smaller customers that is probably going to have 20% marketing budget. So in your experience, which one would you focus for SEO? Would you focus on the 80%? I think there's going to be a positioning that is going to be permanent overall. That cannot change, right? Obviously, you can have landing pages that you can have for different customer profiles, even in those, but there's going to be a bit of permanent position. So on that permanent position, would you rather focus on 20% or would you focus on 80%?
Well, it's kind of a two-parter, and you have to go revenue versus traffic as well.
Yeah.
If you have keywords that you rank really well for, it's a whole lot easier to keep water coming out of a pump that's already been primed than it is to come up and start ranking from a keyword that you've never touched before.
Yep.
So if you have a lot of traffic that's turning into a lot of business from ranking keywords, it absolutely makes sense to keep that up. The question that I get a lot from advertising versus SEO is, well, why wouldn't I just spend all of my money on ads and then the SEO will kind of take care of itself? Well, no, it absolutely doesn't.
Yep.
The way you want to approach advertising versus search engine optimization is advertising can help you identify the keywords that you want to rank for, because it lets you do rapid fire, hypothesis and result. So you can figure out what are those keywords that you really do want to be ranking for, and then you take that content, those keywords, and you support it and start pushing yourself uphill by having a lot of really good, deep, rich content that's going to rank. But it's going to take like 6 months before any given keyword will really start moving the needle as far as moving up in rank. And you'll get an initial pop, but then it levels way out and you'll start seeing more benefit. But advertising is the way to figure out which way to go or read the barometer. And SEO is the underlying bed from which you can keep growing. This is why we do what we call growth-driven design with our clients. So we're always setting hypotheses with our customers and then adjusting and completing new tests to either help a page convert better or to better target our best customer or to get more traffic in. So you're looking at those at all levels.
Okay, amazing insights. And Steve, I'm pretty sure you are going to have tons of comments because this is a conversation related to SEO versus PPC. So now when it comes to ICP, identifying the ICP, I think there are going to be different ICP when it comes to the campaigns as well. So how would you approach this overall when you are splitting your marketing budget across the campaigns, and which are the ICPs that you are going to focus on?
I'm not sure I'm actually the most qualified person at this panel to answer that specific question, simply because the types of customers I work with have ICPs.
Okay.
But they're not sophisticated enough pre-COVID to really understand what that ICP is, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to ask the panel a question and make a comment as an example of how companies' understanding of ICPs has changed because of the necessities brought upon by essentially the COVID. And the result has been that what I mean by that is that, like most of the companies that I work with, their ICP identification was basically taken care of by something called a trade show. So if you sold hooks and bullets and handguns and camo wear, you went to the shooting, hunting, and outdoor trade show in Vegas.
Yeah.
And when you had your booth there or you walked around, that's what you saw. All your ICPs are there, right? And if you're North Face and you need to sell to all the outdoor stores in the United States, you go to Outdoor Retailer or your sales reps go to the regional sales rep association shows, and and all the companies in the United States that have 20 to 30 or 40-year-old buyers who are into the outdoors that want to buy coats for their store, they're already there. And not only that, you probably are staffing that booth with the personas that are coming to that booth, because it's a very persona-driven industry. So now, this is the thing, trade shows have gone away. So a lot of these folks are actually, they don't have the trade shows to go to. There's digital trade shows popping up. But I think what I'm seeing is they're being forced to actually reconsider what their ICPs are and how they might get to them. And I want to hear from everybody else what that looks like with the types of industries they work in. Because ours is fairly well defined. Bob's Bait and Tackle in Eufaula, Alabama was a customer before COVID and after COVID, and it's still pretty easy to find them. You could look them up in the phone book even if you didn't have a trade show, is sort of my point. Whereas if you make, roto-molded plastic doohickeys that go inside anything, how do there's no trade show in Wuhan this year for all the Chinese companies that make roto-molded plastic doohickeys. So what do you do?
Okay, so does anybody want to take that question by any chance? Anybody? Damon? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I will on this, because in the manufacturing world, it was like getting slapped with a dead fish in your face, man, because, it used to be that the salespeople, manufacturers have been very lucky for many years, and I'm not talking large OEMs. I'm talking a lot of the smaller, mom and pop kind of things, sub 50 million. They've got salespeople running around. Those salespeople had relationships they had and built those in these large companies. I can be a perfectly good molar that's selling to a company like Polaris or something like that, and doing really well, and having several accounts like that. But now and that's the way they drove most of their revenue, because one big account makes such a difference. But when you comes now and you look at the way that that has changed, their word of mouth advertising even is getting hit, because they can't, it's just, you have to have so much better digital footprint right now for them to speak to that. They need to understand that ideal customer so much better, because their website before could have been crap and they really didn't care, because their salespeople would find it, and word of mouth, they'd figured it out. But when that salesperson can't go out and build that relationship, boom, like that, they really need to have that ideal customer profile and speak to them with their digital assets, so they do it. And that's the thing that I see more than anything, is that everybody says, well, we get most of our business by word of mouth. Well, how much are you losing? Because people are so used to now, word of mouth is, hey, Damon just found out about this great company. I'm going to go look them up online. If they look like a joke online, I'm done. That's the end of story. Yep. And that's what people are realizing. I think that is in manufacturing is hitting people, like I said, like a dead fish in the face, man, because their people can't just run free like they were before, trying to find business everywhere, and it really hurt.
Yeah, so some very interesting commentary there. Does anybody have any other comments, thoughts on this question? Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that, I think, Steve, your question is a really good one, because I also come from a world where most people think they know who their ICP is. I will say that I don't hear a lot of people talking about ICP, but I do hear people struggling with how to market today, right? So they don't have the language for ICP. It might not have been part of their practice, so that makes this a very relevant discussion. But it's not something that people naturally even know to think about, because they felt for so many years that they already know that. And so does everybody else that's in business with them. So I think there's this reinvention of marketing that's taking place. And probably this is a foundational element to that. So it could almost be a wake-up call for people that, hey, maybe we need to go back to some of these basics so we can define this, so we do have better marketing content, so we are attracting the companies that we want to do business with, so our people are aligned in the right communication. But prior to that, they really thought they already knew this. So I think it's a new concept after COVID for companies. That's how I would answer it.
I want to lean in just one second on this too, because this is so fascinating, the way things have just completely flipped. And for just anecdotally, I'll let you know next week, because I have my first show that I'm speaking at on Friday, and then I go right away to Atlanta for a second show next week. So hopefully things are coming back, and it's going to be interesting. But I think the big thing that came into focus for a lot of these businesses, especially in the B2B space, was they were trying to chop down trees with hammers before, and it just so happened that they had some weak trees. So they were smacking at it, and the trees were falling down because they would go into target-rich environments, right? So the trade show is a target-rich environment if you're lucky. And they would have people there, and they would, shake hands and hand out tchotchkes and business cards and stuff, and magic sort of happened. The difference between that and where we're going, and what really started to dawn on these businesses, is that there are axes out there. There are ways that you can chop down trees in a single swoop, and for that, it's having better data on who those people are, and a wider reach to reach a whole heck of a lot more of them virtually. Now, if you don't have a CRM to back that up, then you're in trouble. And where you could fake it before with trade shows is you would come back with 500 business cards, and your sales team could call and kind of fake it and make it up. But imagine the difference between, especially for, some of these shows are really expensive. So if you spend $100,000 on ads versus $100,000 on a trade show, your entire team is still in play that entire time, and you're probably going to wind up with 10,000 contacts, of which probably 500 will be great instead of maybe 100 cards that you would have picked up in the original show.
And if I can add to that, I think what I'm finding is that my vendors are realizing that trade shows are a really great place to maintain relationships and not the best place to make new ones. And in the end, they're really not a profitable place to send their folks to. And, like somebody said, gosh, I'd had a great year. we didn't send anybody to a trade show all of last year, this is a company with two different sales teams, one consumer, one wholesale, and actually a third industrial that sort of hits the same things. They didn't send anyone anywhere, and they had a 55% increase in revenue last year. So the habits are changing, especially at that corporate level, as people realize just because we did it all the time before doesn't mean we have to keep doing it.
So great points, guys. And I want to come back to our discussion about ICP. So I agree with one point, Steve, that you mentioned, and that is powerful in my opinion. Because traditionally, if you really think about how these ICPs were identified, and you did mention this, that they were driven by the trade shows. If you really think about it, building a community is extremely hard. So some of these trade show companies, they were doing the hard work of identifying these ICPs. And if you actually look at their collateral, okay, they had done all of this. And now you have to do their work to be able to identify. So you are absolutely right that the companies were created based on how trade shows had defined the ICP for each specific vertical. So let's say if you are selling to automotive, you are selling to aerospace, you are probably selling to oil and gas, you are probably selling to some of these steel mills, and then you had those 5 industries that you were selling to, and you had 4 different ICPs because you are going to do 4 different trade shows. Your marketing was 10,000 times 4, 40,000, and that's it. You had your numbers. But now in the digital world, you have to define your ICP. So one strategy could be in identifying that is you can look at how trade shows were doing it, and you can simply replicate that. And I want to ask this question to, let's say, Dave. If I actually followed this strategy, I was going to 4 trade shows. These trade shows are no longer here, and now I am actually replicating the same effort, same fund in my SEO and PPC campaign. Would this work? Would it not work? If it is not going to work, why it is not going to work?
So the answer, of course, is multi-part. But if you're trying to replicate a trade show, you're not going to be able to just start posting a bunch of content and have magic happen. You're going to need to do some laser targeting on who you try to reach. That was the benefit of a trade show. Everybody was in the same room with you, right? And if you had the coolest giveaway, you were likely to get there, right? So you do need to target people and to find, this is where having an ICP, having a buyer persona that's a little bit more behavior-based is definitely going to help, because you can target with ads to drive people to a asset or something that's going to start a conversation. It's the same thing as the laser pointer that you were giving away or the cool bag or whatever, but it's trading, instead of a physical good, a knowledge piece that's going to spark a conversation. Now, the really cool part about that is that your user, the person that picks up your digital tchotchke, is going to be telling you what they're interested in by their usage or non-usage of that tool. And if you build it right, you can almost make it like a choose your own adventure, right? So you send them something really cool, they download that white paper, or they answer that quiz, or they, get that book or whatever it is. And then you give them more on what your ICP needs to be successful. And if they take that bait, if they download that thing, then that's another decision tree. And if you do this right, your website and your marketing becomes that consistent, always on, 24/7 consultative salesperson. If you do it wrong and you're just spewing things out and hoping for the best, well, you're going to get what you always got at trade shows, but virtually, right? So you're going to get virtual crickets instead of just having a liver that hurts the next day. So that's kind of my distinction.
Okay, amazing, guys. So I don't know if anybody has any follow-up comments there.
I do think that there are, outside of trade shows, there are places your ideal customers are hanging out. Yeah. You have to find those online. So it's happening virtually in a virtual world as well. So that you might not be in a physical space with them, but they're going somewhere to get information. And they might not know to come to you yet for that, but you need to appear where they are hanging out. So identifying where they are that's part of that research of, okay, first I identify my ideal customer profile, and then I need to do the research of, okay, where are those people? And once you figure that out, find a way to strategically be there, and then have your brand become known. Talk about the problems you solve. Talk about the value that you bring. So virtually, there's places people are going as well. That's what I would add.
That's excellent, Chris. And the funnest part about that is that you get to add value in little ways. The lazy LinkedIn thing that I hate so much, and that we all probably get every week, is, people spot you and then they try to just dive bomb you and say, hey, I sell crap. Would you like to buy my crap? And that's all I hear, right? But if you're doing it lazy and you're just trying to puke all over them all the time, that's just going to shut them down faster. So it's an art form. And this is why you need to hire people that know what they're doing to engage people in conversation and to start wherever they're hanging out. So absolutely having the right places, but then not just barging into the room with a megaphone and saying, hey, I have stuff, come and buy my stuff, is way less fun, for one, but way less effective than just being the company or the solution that always has the right answers and that people want to work with because you're solving for them. Awesome. Thanks.
What I was going to add briefly, Sam and Dave, onto yours and to Chris, is that if you think about how much money you spend going to trade shows, that's basically a lot of opportunity cost in price, what you spend in expenses that could be spent on human beings as well as trade shows and advertising. And if you think about how much time those people spend standing at those trade shows, and not, they're effective there, but if they took that time, all those people, plus all the cost it took to buy the booth and transport it and take it down and rent the space, sometimes it's $75,000 to be at a show or more, way more actually. So
yeah, way more.
If you spent that on human resources, it just irrespective of what you spent on advertising, you could have a major impact on the relationships you have in the community just by getting people cold calling, or at least some mechanism in which human beings are touching other human beings, and still save a lot of money.
Amazing, guys. So I wanted to cover one question which is always confusing for a lot of people when they are designing their either the digital presence for first time, e-commerce site for the first time. And in my experience, ICP typically has deeper implications. Okay, so if you go to your website guide, they are going to have questions such as, okay, which is the customer or the industry you want to have at the first place, or the second place, or the third place? Okay, which is the page that you want as the first option when the visitors are actually coming to your home page? Okay, so now if you are going to be focusing on ICP number 1, ICP number 2, ICP number 3, I think there is some sense of priority when you are serving multiple industries, multiple customers. So how do you decide between which is going to be your ICP number 1, ICP number 2, assuming that we have all agreed that every business is going to have multiple ICPs? So how do you decide on the priorities? Do you want to take this, Damon?
I'm probably not the most qualified to it. I tell you, from seeing what other people have done, though, a lot of times there's underlying things that you can do on, say, a homepage that will engage your overall ICP pretty well, and then allow them to get really quickly into what they want. But other people on here can answer this a lot better than I can.
Okay, Dave, do you want to take that?
Sure, let the data talk to you. And work against this in HubSpot, for example, which is the tool that I use for my CRM. It's tied into marketing, and I know how well each of the personas is performing. And so if I know that every time I publish for customer profile X, I'm 2 times more likely to get a conversion, well, there's my number one.
Yeah.
Right. But you also need to think about all of the other things that you can use to get that barometer. That it might be click-throughs on ads. It might be what you can get for free just by looking at Google Analytics or Google Trends to see what the hottest topics are. And if you know down to the most basic level who that kind of person is and what that kind of company is for an ICP, and if you know that this is what makes that group tick, these are where the easy dollars are, this is what's going to convert easiest, you have to balance between ease of use and most profit, right? Chris is already raising her hand.
I would just add to make sure that you look at your existing customer base, right? So not just what the data that you're trying to track people, but you have an existing customer base. Many people do, and there's a lot of data on them, right? So you've got your lifetime customer value. You understand the ones that are giving you the repeat business. You know the ones who have been loyal to you. What is common about them? Let that be part of the definition that helps you prioritize the ideal customer profile. So look at your existing customer base. There's a ton of information in there as well.
Go ahead.
I have kind of an interesting example that doesn't closely speaks to this. In the music industry, we work with a company that makes high-end music industry cables. So you've got speaker cables, guitar cables, microphone cables, et cetera, right? And in this particular instance, the manufacturer really has one ICP, and it's stores that sell musical instruments. Maybe they're going to sell institutionally to universities that have music programs, but probably not, right? Mostly they're selling, if they're doing that, they're doing it through Hal Leonard as a distributor. Their website, speaking to what Dave's talking about, their website is actually, should be, and will be, oriented around the avatars of the people that buy. And the musicians that are using those essentially are buying them for three purposes. So they're either practicing at home, they're on stage, or they're in a studio. There aren't huge categories of places unless somebody's doing rock and roll concerts underwater and that I don't know about. That's what so that when you go to this musical instrument cable website, you need to speak to those people. And you also have to have sort of the good, better, best story going in order to make it all make sense. But from the ICP standpoint of the manufacturer, the identification of those avatars and those places, the uses of those, is actually the marketing piece that sells to their ICP because their ICP understands who they're selling to, and now they know how to buy it because they know what it's supposed to look like on their rack because it looks correct on the website. And they're not confused, like, should I be buying, cable A, B, or C? So in this case, it's not one where you have to judge and choose which ICP, but they have to actually manage each of the individual avatars under that ICP, even though the people that are the object of that avatar can buy from this website and aren't the object of the ICP. Does that make sense? So it's an interesting twist on the ICP avatar relationship.
That makes sense completely, though, because there's a lot of industries like that where you have to help your customer be successful with their customers. Chris, you're in that kind of business. You got to make your customers successful. Those OEMs selling to their distributors and their end customers. But that's a great example.
Yep, I like it too.
All right, guys. So we are close to our time now. The only thing we can take right now is the closing advice. Sorry, guys, you guys must have meetings to go, so we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, Eric, I'm actually going to start with you. Do you have closing advice?
Not really advice. I'm not a marketing person, but it's been interesting hearing all these nuances to these things. So it will help me with building out sites for my customers who are marketing types.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Eric. Dave, your closing advice, please.
You really need to take the advice of experts in this space. You've got 6 of them here. And so, by all means, if you have follow-up questions or things, we'd all love to chat with you and answer those for you. The goal of having an ICP, having a persona, is to be as useful as possible to the people that matter most. So if you're not being useful to those people, you're missing out on business. And make sure that you're taking the time to really get to the heart of who you're trying to serve and what success looks like for them.
Okay, amazing. Love it. And guys, we are probably not going to have time for this question. So if you guys can comment later on, we'll definitely appreciate that. So Steve, I'm actually going to move to you for your closing advice, please.
I'm gonna touch on and support something Dave said earlier. Recognize that paid advertising is the number one fastest and most economical and efficient way you can do R&D for your marketing team. You basically you can run things there and learn about SEO. You can learn about your your products. You can actually answer part of that question that's being asked below about social listening and building insights about your products. You can pay for that. You can get it fast, and it's highly accurate.
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, Chris, your closing advice.
Yeah, I would just say make sure you do the work of identifying your ICP, because it does give you a better return on your marketing efforts. So by getting that relentless focus on who it is you're trying to attract, you're going to have greater focus in your content, and you're also going to have better alignment internally in your organization. So do the exercise.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. Damon, your closing advice, please.
Well, I think I'm just going to echo some of the things that I've said, but one of them is this is something that you need to use professionals for. I mean, I don't try to do this on my own. It's just not something you can do, especially when you're going to do what Dave is talking about with understanding the data and doing it right. And don't think that you can turn this over to some new college graduate or something like that. Nothing against it, but it's something this is difficult stuff. And you really take the time to find the right people to help you with it, because you can waste a ton of money really fast.
Yeah, completely agree. This is going to be really foundation of your entire business in my mind. That's the foundation of business model. So thank you so much, Dave, for that insight. Guys, I just want to thank you, everybody, for their time and insights. I know you guys.
I want to interrupt you and ask you what your advice is, Sam. Then you can sign off.
So my advice is going to be listen to this show. The amount of insight that we have as part of the show, I think that is just phenomenal. This is just free advice. A lot of people can learn a lot from this. So thank you so much, Steve. Again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Eric Landman, head over to earthlinginteractive.com. It's EARTHLINGINTERACTIVE.com. If you want to learn more about Chris Harrington, head over to genalpha.com. It's GENALPHA.com. If you want to learn more about Dave Meyer, head over to buzzyweb.com. It's BIZZYWEB.com. If you want to learn more about Damon Pistelka, head over to exityourway.us. It's EXITYOURWAY.us. If you want to learn more about Steve Rice, head over to .comjungle.com. It's DOTCOMJUNGLE.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Jeff White, who discusses why it is so important to identify the ideal customer profile for your offerings to streamline your growth. Also, the interview with Steve Rice, who discusses why congruence is the most important factor to optimize product category architecture, navigation, user experience, customer journeys, and campaign design. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to get you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.